Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Now, as you could probably guess from the title of this video, yes, we're going to talk about the Skaven changes in the recent update. But hear me out, it's not so much complaining in regards to what they've changed for players, but changes in general. So if you weren't aware, with the recent Rakarth release and the update that came alongside it, there was a rather big change towards Skaven and their campaign balance. Admittedly, yes, the Skaven were in a place where they were quite overpowered, and yes, some balancing changes were indeed needed, but I feel like these changes themselves don't really affect the players too much, but more so the AI factions. Skaven minor factions themselves are the ones that have been hit the hardest, and it's actually quite weird to me, as the Skaven themselves, more specifically the minor factions, don't generally last too long on the campaign map. So what we're going to do is go over the changes that have been recently added in, and discuss what effect that actually has. First off, let's talk about the big changes to stances, as you can see on screen right now. Now the main change here is that the Skaven factions themselves will find it a lot harder to be able to do an ambush attack, which really as a player does not affect you that much. Let's be honest, as a player you don't really need to rely on ambushes. At a certain point in your campaign, very early on in most cases, you will have a bunch of weapons teams and, well, corner camping or just firing with a lot of guns. Having a reduced chance to ambush really doesn't affect the players whatsoever. However, it does affect the AI factions. The player will always be smarter than the AI, so these issues don't tend to affect us. However, Skaven are very much based on ambushes, and the AI for the Skaven is pretty much revolving around that. Bear in mind that this is a race with very low leadership units. They tend to break quite easily, so ambushes is how Skaven actually fight in lore. It just feels like a big reduction to how the Skaven actually work. We're getting them to fight more like other factions when they should be focusing around ambushes. Again, as I said, this is focusing towards the AI factions. They should act like Skavens. The player can do damn well as they please, but the Skaven AI should act like Skaven. Now let's look towards the changes to Skaven corruption. Skaven factions were generally able to passively produce very large quantities of Skaven corruption. Not only did this allow them to overwhelm the untainted produced by other factions, it also meant that there was very little point for Skaven players to attempt control of Skaven corruption. Okay, yes, I can completely agree with that statement. But let's be honest, when do Skaven players actually even bother with Skaven corruption? We tend to build the same buildings over and over just because they unlock certain units or certain bonuses. The thing that really doesn't make sense to me here is that certain buildings, like for example the Assassin's Chain and the Warrior's Chain, they don't produce Skaven corruption, they produce untainted. You'd think that some buildings centered around the training of troops would also spread some sort of corruption. Everything else I can kinda agree with though. Plus this did indeed give us some sort of buff more than a nerf, as of course we get some extra public order from the Efficient Planning Provincial Edict. There were some changes to Menace Below, which overall would mean a slight reduction to the number of Menace Below charges passively gained via Skaven corruption. Once again, this is not a problem for players, as we are able to just stockpile food and use that to generate Menace Below charges. Even then, at certain points, we don't really even need it, as, well, like I said, gun lines. The changes here, in all honesty, I believe were not too needed. If anything, they should have reworked on how the AI uses Menace Below charges, as usually it's very nonsensical. I'm sure many of you here have fought against some Skaven factions, and what happens in some cases? They'll just use a Menace Below charge when their armies are very far away, or nothing's really in range, or just in general places where nothing really makes sense. There have been quite a few times where I've seen Menace Below being used against me right in front of my front line, so by the time that they actually spawned, my high elf archers would just delete them. Menace Below does need changes, but in an AI aspect, not with charges. There are a few things to talk about in the other changes section. Firstly, minor Skaven factions will no longer perform Scheme of Doom or the Pestilence Scheme. Okay, so let's talk about this. Scheme of Doom was kinda pointless because they always used to hit a town or a city with walls, which then they wouldn't attack. It actually became a bit of a meme because this was constantly happening, yet no invasion from the Skaven. Pestilence Scheme, however, was very much random in the same way, however it did spread plague, which, well, is a main part of Skaven lore. It's not like this was extremely common, or at least to my knowledge, as I do play this game quite a lot, but it feels like a big aspect of the Skaven, even for a minor faction, has been removed. Next, AI Skaven factions are less likely to take skills that boost ambush success chance. We already talked about this in detail. Skaven are focused around ambush attacks. Even then it wasn't that common, but now just taking that away from them is going to make it even less so. A few others are generally positive, so there's not much reason to go through them. However, there are two others to go through. Reduced baseline number of charges of the Skaven Warp Bomb army ability to 1. Additional charges can be gained by upgrading the garrison building in major settlements. This more or less just really affects players. I don't really think I've seen the AI use this too much. Even with the reduction, it doesn't really affect the player base too much. Yes, sieges will last a bit longer and you will lose a bit more troops, but other than that, it's not really too much of a drastic change. You can still get more if you upgrade your major settlements, so that's perfectly fine. The only issue I have once again is that the AI needs to be improved for Skaven factions so they actually use this efficiently. Lastly, a basic change here, but a welcome one at that. Skaven will now use a wall settlement map when defending Empire forts and High Elven gates. This is actually a great change, and I'm actually going to sing its praises as well. You've got to take into account that a lot of these settlements would not have walls for you, so in most cases, players wouldn't really take them over as they provided to be more of a hindrance rather than a benefit. Now we'll actually have some incentive to keep them, and they will provide a benefit in early campaigns, especially when playing as Ikit Claw and taking the forts that lead towards the Empire. When they declare war on you, at least now you have a defensive position. All in all, as you can see, my issues with this update are more centered around the punishment to Skaven AI factions, where they're now not really going to act like Skaven whatsoever. Minor factions, as I said before, don't generally last a long time. It's usually just Queek Headtaker's main faction which actually goes out and builds up an empire? The Skaven are powerful, yes, I'm not going to dispute that, but it seems that this is just a really strange nerf. Again, it feels like it's centered towards the AI, where the Skaven factions are not going to act like Skaven. I don't think this is a general step in the right direction. The Skaven were okay as they were, and yes, they needed some nerfs, but those which have come to effect don't tend to make much sense to me. I'm literally looking at them right now after playing for a few hours as a Skaven faction, whilst also having no fog of war to keep an eye on the minor Skaven factions themselves. If anything, it's just giving the Order factions more and more reason to expand, and in my opinion, that's the faction that actually needs the most in terms of balance changes. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.